The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal fields of Kepler-4 for 2b. Elder. Zara walked slowly through the glowing meadows where her people had lived in peace for over 3,000 years. The Vani moved like graceful dancers between the tall crystal formations that grew from their world's rich soil. Their deer-like bodies swayed gently as they tended the growing crystals that provided both food and shelter for their civilization. Zara's crystalline horns caught the sunlight as she paused near the central grove. At 400 years old, she was considered young by Vani standards, but the weight of leadership had aged her spirit. The other Vani respected her wisdom and gentle nature. She had never raised her voice in anger, never felt the urge to harm another living being. Violence was simply not part of their nature. The Vani had built their society on harmony and collective growth. They shared resources freely, made decisions through long discussions where every voice mattered, and believed that all life was sacred. Their cities were beautiful gardens where crystal spires reached toward the sky, and their people spent their days in meditation, art, and peaceful cultivation of their world. But now everything was changing. 3 days ago, the emergency beacon had activated for the first time in Vani history. The news from their sister colonies was devastating. The Corach Empire had come to their region of space, and where the Corach went, death followed. Zara remembered the last transmission from Colony 7, the voice of Elder. Moran had been calm even as his world burned around him. They came. Without warning, he had said, ships filled the sky like dark clouds. They demanded our surrender, and when we tried to negotiate peace, they began destroying our cities. They are taking the survivors as slaves. Elder Zara warned the others. The Corach do not understand mercy. Colony 7 went silent after that message. Then Colony 12 fell, and Colony 15. Each time, the pattern was the same.
The Corach
demanded immediate surrender. When the peaceful Vani tried to discuss terms or ask for time, the reptilian warriors began killing civilians until compliance was achieved. The Corach were everything the Vani were not. They were aggressive hunters who had conquered dozens of worlds. Their society was built on strength and dominance. They saw compassion as weakness and mercy as foolishness. To them, the Vani were simply resources to be harvested. Now Zara stood in her people's most sacred grove, knowing that Corach ships were already moving toward their world. Long-range sensors had detected the massive fleet approaching their system. They had perhaps 10 days before the enemy arrived.
Elder Zara.
The voice belonged to Kellas, her closest advisor. He approached with the careful steps all Vani used. When entering sacred spaces, the council has finished their discussions. They await your decision. Zara turned to face him. Kellas was younger than her, barely 200 years old, but his silver eyes held deep concern. What options do we have, old friend? The same as before, Kellas replied softly. We can surrender immediately and hope the Corach treat us with some kindness. We can try to evacuate as many people as possible to the outer colonies, though the ships would likely catch us. Or, he paused, looking uncomfortable. Or we can send the distress signal, Zara finished for him. The distress signal was a desperate idea proposed by their youngest council member. Zara the Vani had basic knowledge of galactic politics through their peaceful trade relationships. They knew there were hundreds of species among the stars, some peaceful like themselves, others more warlike. Yara had suggested broadcasting a plea for help across known space, hoping that some merciful species would answer their call. Most of the council thought it was hopeless. Why would strangers risk their lives for people they had never met? But as Zara looked around at the crystal groves where Vani children played and learned, she felt a spark of determination. Prepare the signal, she said quietly. Kellas nodded and activated his communication device. Within minutes, the message was ready. Zara had written it herself, pouring all her hope and desperation into simple words that could be translated by most galactic species. To any who received this message, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. We are the Vani of the Kepler system. We are a peaceful people who have never known war or violence. Our 3 colony worlds have been destroyed by the Corach Empire, And now they come for our homeworld. We have no weapons, no armies, no way to defend ourselves. We do not seek warriors or weapons of destruction. We seek those who understand mercy and compassion. If there are any among the stars who believe that peaceful beings deserve to live, please help us. We're not asking you to fight for us. We only ask that you witness our existence before it ends, so that someone will remember that we tried to. Live in harmony with all life. The transmission went out across subspace, spreading through the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds. It would reach the major trade routes within hours, the outer colonies within days. Most species would probably ignore it or consider it not their problem. But Zara clung to hope that somewhere among the stars, someone would care. Far from Kepler 44b, on a small moon orbiting Earth, Communications Officer Lisa Martinez was ending her night shift at Luna Base Monitoring Station. The facility tracked deep space communications, watched for potential threats, and maintained contact with Earth's growing number of exploration vessels. Lisa had been looking forward to going home to her small apartment and sleeping for 10 hours straight. She had been on duty for 3 days, monitoring routine traffic and the occasional scientific data burst from research ships. Nothing exciting ever happened during the night shift. Then her console lit up with an incoming transmission from the Kepler system. Lisa frowned as she read the message. The translation software identified it as coming from a species called the Vani. She had never heard of them, but the automated systems confirmed they were listed in the Galactic species database as a peaceful trading civilization. As she read Zara's words, Lisa felt something tighten in her chest. The message was simple, direct, and heartbreaking. An entire species facing extinction, asking not for weapons or armies, but simply for someone to care that they existed. Most officers would have filed the report, passed it up the chain of command for eventual review. But Lisa had a younger sister back on Earth. Somehow the desperate hope in the alien message reminded her of the way her sister had sounded when bullies at school had threatened her. Instead of filing the report, Lisa opened a direct communication channel to the UES Horizon, humanity's newest deep space exploration vessel. The ship was currently 3 days away from Earth, conducting routine patrol operations in the outer system. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing supply reports in his quarters when the priority message came through. He was a career military officer who had volunteered for deep space service because he believed humanity had a responsibility to explore the galaxy peacefully. Morrison was 42 years old, experienced enough to make hard decisions, young enough to still believe in doing the right thing. He read the Vani message twice, then called his senior staff to the briefing room. "Sir," said his first officer, "Commander Helen Brooks. After reading the transmission, Earth Command hasn't issued any orders regarding this situation. Technically, it's not our problem." Morrison looked around the table at his officers. These were good people who had joined deep space service to explore and discover, not to fight wars. But he also knew that each of them had joined because they believed humanity should use its strength to help others. "What do we know about this Corach Empire?" Morrison asked. Lieutenant Kevin Ross, their intelligence officer, activated the holographic display. "Limited information, sir. They're a reptilian species with a highly aggressive expansion pattern. They've conquered 17 star systems in the past 50 years. No records of them showing mercy to conquered populations. And the Vani, peaceful, herbivorous species? No military capability. They've been trading partners with several galactic civilizations for centuries. No record of any conflicts or aggressive actions." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Earth's own history, about all the times when evil had triumphed because good people chose to do nothing. He thought about the Vani children who would die if no one answered their plea. "Helm, set course for the Kepler system. Maximum speed," he ordered. "Sir," Commander Brooks said carefully, "Earth Command will want to review this decision." Morrison looked at her steadily. "Then they can review it after we save those people. Sometimes doing the right thing means asking for forgiveness rather than permission." The U.S. Horizon changed course and jumped to hyperspace, carrying 200 human crew members toward a distant world where peaceful beings waited for death or rescue. Elder Zara stewed in her crystal grove as the first Corach ships appeared. In their system's outer edge, She had received no response to her distress signal. No merciful strangers were coming to help her people. She began to prepare her people for the end, not knowing that help was already racing toward them at faster than light speed. The EU's horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, and Captain Jake Morrison immediately knew they were too late to prevent the attack. The tactical display showed dozens of Corach warships already in orbit around the Vani homeworld. Bright flashes of energy weapons lit up the planet's atmosphere as the bombardment began. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the planet's surface," reported Communications Officer Lisa Martinez, who had requested transfer to the horizon for this mission. "The Corach ships are targeting civilian population centers." Morrison gripped his command chair as he watched the destruction unfold on the main screen. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were being reduced to rubble. The Corach weren't trying to conquer the planet carefully. They were making an example of it. "Open a channel to the planet," Morrison ordered. "Maybe we can still help some of them." The view screen flickered, then showed the face of Elder Zara. She was inside what appeared to be an underground shelter, and Morrison could hear explosions in the background. Her large, gentle eyes were filled with sadness but not fear. Even facing death, she maintained the calm dignity of her species. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Vessel Horizon," he said. "We received your distress signal. We're here to help." Zara's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with something that might have been hope. "You came," she whispered. "Someone actually came." "Yes, ma'am. We're going to get you out of this. Can you tell me how many of your people are still alive?" 3 million on the surface," Zara replied. "Many more in the underground shelters. But I must ask, what species are you? Our databases show that Earth is listed as a death world. Are you truly here to help us, or have we simply attracted a different kind of predator?" Morrison paused. He had forgotten that most galactic species were terrified of anything that evolved on high-gravity, high-danger worlds like Earth. To them, humans were Deathworlders, creatures so dangerous that they could survive on planets that would kill. "Most other forms of life, we're here to help," he said firmly. "We don't hurt innocent people." But even as he spoke, Morrison could see the doubt in Zara's eyes. She was trying to be grateful, but everything in her cultural knowledge told her that Deathworlders were creatures to be feared. "We will prepare landing sites for your shuttles," Zara said carefully. "Though I must warn you, our people may be frightened of your appearance." The transmission ended, and Morrison turned to his officers. Commander Helen Brooks had been listening to the conversation with a thoughtful expression. "Sir, she's right to be concerned," Brooks said. "The galactic databases classify humans as apex predators. Most peaceful species consider us barely controlled." "Killers, that's ridiculous," Morrison replied. "We are one of the most cooperative species in the galaxy. 2 other humans, yes. But think about it from their perspective. We evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. We have forward-facing eyes like hunters, show our teeth when we're happy. We can function while injured, and we actually become more dangerous when we're protecting something we care about." Morrison realized that Brooks was right. What humans saw as normal survival traits, other species saw as the characteristics of nightmare predators. "Well, we'll just have to show them who we really are," he decided. "Commander Brooks, prepare the first wave of Marines for planetary assault. Brief them carefully. These people are terrified of us already. We need to be extra careful about how we present ourselves." Within an hour, the first human shuttles were descending toward the planet's surface. Commander Brooks led the mission personally, bringing 50 Marines and support personnel. As their shuttle approached the coordinates Zara had provided, they could see the devastation the Corach bombardment had caused. Entire districts of the Crystal City lay in ruins. The beautiful spires that had taken centuries to grow were shattered like broken glass. Fires burned in the rubble, and the air was thick with smoke and dust. The shuttle landed in a clearing that had once been a peaceful garden. As the ramp lowered, Brooks and her team got their first look at the Vani in person. They were even more delicate than the humans had expected. The Vani stood about 7 feet tall, but were incredibly thin and graceful. Their movements were slow and deliberate, like dancers performing a sacred ritual. Their crystalline horns caught the light, and created small rainbows in the smoky air. Elder Zara approached the shuttle, flanked by several other Vani. Brooks could see them trying not to show fear, but their large eyes kept darting between the humans' faces, clearly disturbed by what they saw there. Brooks removed her helmet and tried to smile gently, but she realized immediately that showing her teeth was probably making things worse. The Vani took a step backward. "Elder Zara," Brooks said, keeping her voice as soft as possible. "I'm Commander Helen Brooks. We're here to help evacuate your people." Zara studied Brooks carefully. The human was shorter than most Vani, but she moved with a fluid confidence that spoke of perfect physical control. Her eyes scanned the area constantly, never focusing on one spot for long, always watching for threats. Even trying to be gentle, she radiated the controlled readiness of a predator. "You are very kind to come," Zara said diplomatically. "But I must ask, why would Deathworlders risk themselves for strangers?" Brooks considered her answer carefully. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said finally. "On Earth, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." "But you are warriors," said Kelazar's advisor. "Your people evolved to fight and kill. How do we know you won't simply take our world for yourselves once you drive away the Corach?" Private Ryan Clark was unloading medical supplies from the shuttle when a piece of twisted metal cut deeply into his forearm. The Vani watched in shock as blood began flowing from the wound. But instead of stopping to treat the injury, Clark simply wrapped a bandage around his arm and continued working. "Are you not in pain?" asked a young Vani healer named Nira. "Sure," Clark replied casually. "But people need these supplies more than I need to complain about a cut." The Vani stared at him in amazement. This creature could continue functioning while bleeding, and he was more concerned about helping them than treating his own wound. They didn't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Meanwhile, Colonel Tony Garcia was setting up the tactical command post and reviewing Corach troop positions with his officers. The Vani listened in growing horror as the humans discussed their plans. "We'll need to establish acceptable casualty rates," Garcia said, studying his tactical display. "The Corach have superior numbers, so we'll need to use guerrilla tactics to even the odds." "What about civilian protection?" asked Major Dan Carter. "Priority 1. We'll set up safe zones here and here." Garcia pointed to his map. "Anyone tries to hurt non-combatants, we eliminate them immediately." Humans talked about eliminating enemies disturbed the Vani deeply. These creatures spoke of death and tactics as easily as the Vani. Discussed growing crystals or composing poetry. Elder Zara pulled her aide aside. "Kellas, what have we done?" she whispered. "We asked the universe for mercy, and instead we have summoned demons." But Elder Kellas replied uncertainly, "Look at how they treat our wounded. Look at how they organize medical care before weapons. These demons seem to care more about protecting our people than we do." Zara watched as Sergeant Amy Foster helped an injured Vani child. The human's movements were gentle and careful, but Zara could see the predator muscles beneath Foster's uniform. The way her eyes constantly scanned for threats, even while providing medical aid. "They are apex predators pretending to be healers," Zara said. "How can we trust beings whose every instinct tells them to hunt and kill?" Far above the planet, General Vask studied the new arrivals from his flagship. The Corach commander was a massive reptilian creature with scarred hide and cold yellow eyes. He had conquered 17 worlds, and none had ever been able to resist his forces. "These humans claim to be protectors," he hissed to his aide. "But our psychic scanners read them as apex predators. They radiate the mental signature of killing machines." "Should we be concerned, General?" his aide asked. Vask laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Was concerned about creatures who speak of protecting civilians. These Deathworlders are as weak as the Vani. They have the tools to be proper predators, but they waste their strength on mercy. We will crush them easily." The Corach general was making the same mistake that many others had made throughout galactic history. He saw human compassion as weakness, never understanding that the most dangerous predator in the universe was one that chose to protect instead of prey. Back on the planet's surface, the humans continued their preparations. They set up medical stations, organized evacuation routes, and began studying Corthok battle tactics. The Vani watched these Deathworlders work with growing confusion. These creatures moved like hunters, thought like warriors, and planned like conquerors. But everything they did was focused on protecting people they had never met before. They had traveled across the galaxy to help strangers, bringing weapons and medicine in equal measure. The attack began at dawn. General Vask had positioned his forces for what he expected to be a quick victory over the small human force. The Corthok had superior numbers, heavier weapons, and years of experience crushing peaceful civilizations. Against 200 humans and millions of defenseless Vani, it should have been simple. The first wave of Corthok ground troops landed in the ruins of the Crystal City, expecting to find the humans dug into defensive positions like most military forces would be. Instead, they found empty buildings and silence. "Where are they?" demanded Captain Rex, the Corthok field commander. His reptilian features twisted in confusion as his soldiers searched the abandoned human positions. The scanners showed 200 heat signatures here just hours ago. His answer came from the underground tunnel system that the Vani had used for meditation retreats. Sergeant Amy Foster led her squad through passages that the Corthok had dismissed as unimportant. Humans had spent the night mapping every cave, every tunnel, every hidden path beneath the city. Foster's team emerged behind the Corthok lines and immediately began their attack. But this wasn't the chaotic violence the Corthok expected from warriors. Every human movement was precise and calculated. They used the Corthok's own weapons against them, took cover in positions that offered maximum protection, and coordinated their attacks with deadly efficiency. "Alpha Team, mark your targets," Foster whispered into her communicator. "Remember, we're not here to win glory. We're here to protect civilians." The distinction mattered. Human military doctrine was built around achieving objectives with minimum casualties, not maximum destruction. While the Corthok fought to dominate and terrorize, the humans fought to protect and preserve. Lieutenant Kevin Ross demonstrated this difference when his team encountered a group of Corthok soldiers threatening captured Vani civilians. Instead of launching a direct assault that might harm the prisoners, Ross used psychological warfare. "Corthok forces," he announced through a captured communicator. "You are surrounded by human special forces. We have your position targeted for orbital bombardment. You have 30 seconds to release the prisoners and withdraw, or we will level the entire district." It was a complete bluff. The humans had no orbital weapons, and Ross's team consisted of only 6 soldiers. But the Corthok had heard stories about Deathworld tactics. They believed that creatures from such a dangerous planet would have no hesitation about destroying everything to achieve their goals. The Corthok released their prisoners and retreated, never knowing they had been fooled by pure deception. Elder Zara watched these events unfold from the human command post with growing amazement. The Deathworlders fought like nothing she had ever imagined possible. They didn't charge forward in mindless aggression. Instead, they used their environment, studied their enemies, and turned the Corthok's own strengths against them.
"Your people
fight very strangely," she said to Captain Morrison, who was coordinating the defense from his mobile command center. Morrison looked up from his tactical displays. "What do you mean? The Corthok are stronger individually? They have better weapons and more soldiers? Yet your people are winning. Superior strength doesn't always determine the outcome," Morrison explained. "Humans learned a long time ago that the biggest predator doesn't always survive. Sometimes it's the smartest one, or the most adaptable one, or the one that works best with others." As if to prove his point, Staff Sergeant Monica Wells was demonstrating human adaptability in the Eastern District. Her team had discovered that the Corthok communicated using specific frequency bursts. By jamming those frequencies, Wells had effectively blinded an entire Corthok battalion. "They can't coordinate their attacks if they can't talk to each other," she explained to her squad. "Now they're just individual soldiers instead of an organized unit." The Corthok began to realize they were facing something unprecedented. Humans didn't fight like any species they had encountered before. Most civilizations either surrendered immediately or fought desperately from fixed positions. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before retaliation was possible. Colonel, Tony Garcia had studied every available record of Corthok tactics during the journey to Kepler-44 to B. He knew that reptilian species tended to rely on hierarchy and rigid command structures. By targeting communication nodes and command posts, the humans could turn the Corthok's organized strength into confused weakness. Take out their commanders, Garcia ordered. These aren't independent thinking soldiers. They're following orders from above. Remove the head and the body stops functioning. Strategy worked brilliantly. As human teams eliminated Corthok officers and communication equipment, the enemy forces began making tactical errors. Units advanced without support, retreated without orders, failed to coordinate their attacks. But it was the human treatment of wounded enemies that truly confused the Vani observers. When Private Ryan Clark found an injured Corthok soldier, he didn't execute the enemy as the Corthok would have done. Instead, he provided basic medical treatment and arranged for the soldier to be taken to a prisoner holding area. Heal those who came to kill us, asked Nira, the young Vani healer who had been working alongside the humans. Clark looked at her in surprise. Because he's not trying to kill us anymore. He's just a hurt person who needs help. The concept was completely foreign to both the Vani and the Corthok. The Vani couldn't understand how predators could show mercy to enemies. Couldn't understand why these dangerous Deathworlders would waste resources helping wounded foes. General Vask watched the battle reports with growing frustration. His superior forces were being outmaneuvered by a handful of humans who seemed to treat warfare like some kind of intellectual puzzle. Every time he tried to establish a strategy, the humans adapted and found a new approach. These Deathworlders fight without honor, he hissed to his second-in-command. They hide like cowards and strike from the shadows. Perhaps we should change our approach, General, suggested his aide. These humans seem to be protecting the Vani civilians. If we threaten the non-combatants directly, we might force them into open battle. Vask considered this suggestion. Humans had shown an unusual concern for protecting the Vani. Perhaps their compassion could be used as a weapon against them. Begin targeting the civilian shelters, Vask ordered. If these humans want to protect the weak, let them try to be everywhere at once. The order represented a fundamental miscalculation. Vask thought human protective instincts were a weakness to be exploited. He didn't understand that threatening innocent people would only make the humans more dangerous, not less. When the Corthok began their attacks on civilian targets, the human response was immediate and devastating. Captain Morrison's voice cut through all communication channels with cold fury. All units, priority alpha. Civilian protection protocols are now in effect. Any Corthok forces threatening non-combatants are to be eliminated immediately. The change in human behavior was remarkable. The same soldiers who had been fighting with careful precision suddenly became relentless hunting machines. Foster's team moved through the city like ghosts, appearing wherever Corthok forces threatened civilians and striking with lethal efficiency. Lieutenant Ross coordinated rescue operations with the smooth precision of someone who had trained for such scenarios his entire life. Human soldiers risked their own lives repeatedly to save Vani families, carrying wounded civilians through active combat zones without hesitation. Elder Zara watched Corporal Rachel Stone carry 3 Vani children to safety while under heavy fire. The human never slowed down, never showed fear, never considered abandoning her charges, even when enemy weapons targeted her directly. I don't understand your people, Zara, said to Morrison. You fight like predators, but you protect like parents. What are you really? Morrison was quiet for a moment, watching his soldiers risk everything to save people they had never met. We're both, he said finally. Humans learned that the strongest predators are the ones who protect their pack. We extended that concept to include anyone who needs protection, even strangers from another world. Especially strangers from another world. That's what makes us human. As the day wore on, the Corthok began to understand the true nature of their opponents. These weren't just efficient killers or soft-hearted protectors. They were something far more dangerous. They were predators who had chosen to use their deadly skills in service of compassion. The realization came too late. By targeting civilians, General Vosk had made the worst possible tactical error. He had threatened the innocent in front of creatures whose entire evolutionary history had prepared them. To defend the helpless, the humans were no longer fighting to drive away invaders. They were fighting to protect their adopted pack, and nothing in the galaxy was more dangerous than human beings. Defending those they had chosen to care about. As night fell over the Crystal City, the Korthok forces found themselves trapped between their rigid military doctrine and an enemy that seemed to rewrite the rules of combat with every engagement. The second day of battle brought desperation from the Korthok forces. General Vosk had lost over half his ground troops to human tactics he couldn't understand or counter. The Deathworlders seemed to anticipate every move his forces made, striking at weak points he didn't even know existed, but Vosk still had one advantage. His orbital fleet controlled the space around the planet. His flagship carried enough firepower to level entire continents. If he couldn't defeat the humans with ground forces, he would force them to surrender by threatening something they clearly valued more than their own lives. Prepare the orbital bombardment cannons, Vosk ordered from his command bridge. The largest civilian shelter will give these humans a choice: surrender immediately or watch millions of innocents die.
Hey!
His aide hesitated. General, using orbital weapons against civilian targets violates several galactic treaties. Vosk's yellow eyes glowed with cold fury. These Deathworlders have made a mockery of proper warfare. They hide among civilians like cowards and use mercy as a weapon. If they want to protect the weak, let them face the consequences of that choice. On the planet's surface, Captain Morrison received the ultimatum through all communication channels. Vosk's voice was filled with reptilian hatred as he delivered his terms. Human Commander, you have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you do not comply, we will destroy the main civilian shelter and everyone inside it. Every hour after that, we will destroy another shelter until you submit. Your choice is simple. Save yourselves or save them. Morrison looked around his command post at the faces of his officers. Every human present understood what this meant. They could escape in their shuttles and return to Earth with their lives. But 3 million Vani would die slowly and horribly. While they watched from space, Commander Helen Brooks spoke first. Sir, there might be a way to take out their flagship. If we could coordinate a direct assault on their orbital position. It would be a suicide mission, said Colonel Garcia quietly. They have escort ships, defensive systems, and superior firepower. We might damage them, but we wouldn't survive the attempt. The math is simple, added Major Dan Carter. We can save ourselves and let the Vani die, or we can try to save them and die in the process. There's no third option. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. In the background, he could hear the sounds of his soldiers continuing their work. Human medics treating wounded Vani. Human engineers repairing damaged shelters, human soldiers standing guard over civilians they had known for less than 2 days. Actually, there is a third option, Morrison said finally. We don't get to choose between their lives and ours. We choose to do whatever it takes to protect innocent people, regardless of the cost. Elder Zara had been listening to the conversation from her position near the communication station. She stepped forward, her crystalline horns catching the light from the emergency lamps. Captain Morrison, she said softly, we cannot ask you to die for us. You have already done more than anyone could expect. Take your people and leave. We will remember your kindness, even in our final moments. Morrison looked at the gentle alien who was trying to release them from their moral obligation. With respect, you didn't ask us to come here. We chose to come, and we don't abandon people just because it gets difficult. But you will all die, Zara said, tears forming in her large eyes. Your families will never see you again. Your children will grow up without parents. How can the lives of strangers be worth such a sacrifice? Because if we let innocent people die when we could save them, we wouldn't be worth saving ourselves. Morrison replied. That's what it means to be human. The conversation was interrupted by Corporal Rachel Stone, who had been working with Vani refugees all day. Sir, I've been talking to the civilians in the shelters. I want you to know something. What is it, Corporal? They're not afraid anymore. Yesterday they were terrified of us because we look like predators, but now they trust us completely. The children ask for human soldiers when they have nightmares. The adults say they feel safe for the first time since this started. Stone paused, then continued. Sir, these people have never seen anyone fight to protect strangers before. They thought the universe was full of species who only cared about themselves. We're showing them something they never knew existed. Morrison nodded slowly. The young corporal was right. This wasn't just about saving Vani lives. It was about proving that mercy and strength could exist together, that someone would stand up for the innocent even when it cost everything. Commander Brooks, Morrison said, "Prepare the assault shuttles. We're going after that flagship." Sir Brooks replied, "I've been thinking about this. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. I'll lead the assault team personally. Helen, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You taught me that sometimes leadership means being the first one through the door." "Besides," she smiled grimly, "I joined the military to protect people. That's what I signed up for." Within an hour, Brooks had assembled a volunteer assault team of 40 Marines. Every single human on the planet had volunteered, but the shuttles could only carry so many. Those chosen were the best pilots, the most experienced fighters, and the ones with the skills needed for ship-to-ship combat. As the team prepared to depart, the Vani gathered to watch. They still didn't fully understand these strange Deathworlders, but they understood sacrifice. They understood that beings they had never met before were about to die trying to save them. Lieutenant Kevin Ross made final checks on his equipment as he prepared to board the assault shuttle. Nira, the young Vani healer, approached him with something in her hands. "This is a blessing crystal," she said, offering him the small, glowing stone. "In our culture, we give these to those who go into great danger. It doesn't provide protection, but it carries our hopes and prayers." Ross took the crystal carefully. "Thank you, but you should keep this. We're probably not coming back." "It's exactly why you should have it," Nira replied. "So you know that whatever happens, someone will remember what you tried to do." Similar scenes played out across the landing area as Vani offered small gifts and quiet words to the humans preparing for their final mission. Commander Brooks, as she conducted her final briefing. "Commander, I need you to understand something," Zara said. "We are a people who have never known violence or warfare. We don't understand military tactics or strategic thinking, but we do understand love, and we understand sacrifice. Ma'am?"
What you were doing?
"This willingness to die for strangers? This is not the behavior of predators or killing machines. This is the behavior of the most advanced species we have ever encountered. If you survive this, we want to learn from you. If you don't, we will spend the rest of our lives trying to become worthy of your sacrifice." Brooks felt something tighten. In her throat, "Elder Zara, you're already worthy. That's why we're doing this." The assault shuttles launched into the dark sky, carrying 40 humans toward a battle they couldn't win against an enemy that outnumbered and outgunned them completely. On the ground, the remaining humans continued their work of protecting civilians and treating the wounded, as if they weren't all about to die. In space, General Vask watched the approaching shuttles with amusement. 40 Deathworlders against an entire fleet, he hissed to his bridge crew. "They are either completely insane or completely desperate." "Shall we destroy them now, General?" asked his weapons officer. "Let them come. Let them see the futility of their gesture before we kill them. They realize they cannot win. Perhaps they will beg for mercy. I want to hear these apex predators plead for their lives before I end them." It was the last mistake General Vask would ever make. He thought he was facing desperate soldiers attempting a hopeless assault. He didn't understand that he was about to encounter the most dangerous force in the universe, human beings who had decided they would rather die than let innocent people suffer. The shuttles accelerated toward the Corach flagship, carrying their crews toward certain death and possible victory. Behind them, the planet turned slowly in space, where millions of Vani waited to see if mercy and courage were stronger than superior firepower and overwhelming odds. In the end, the battle would be decided not by weapons or numbers, but by the simple question of what each species was willing to sacrifice for their beliefs. Commander Helen Brooks guided her assault shuttle through the maze of Corach escort ships. Watching her tactical display as enemy fighters moved to intercept her small fleet, the odds were impossible. 40 humans and 6 shuttles against an entire battle fleet. But Brooks had stopped thinking about survival hours ago. "Target the flagship's communication array first," she ordered over the radio. "If we can blind them, the rest of their fleet won't be able to coordinate properly." Lieutenant Kevin Ross piloted the lead shuttle with the steady hands of someone who had accepted his fate. The blessing crystal from Nira sat clipped to his uniform, glowing softly in the shuttle's dim lighting. Around him, his squad mates checked their weapons one final time. Remember, Ross said to his team, "We're not here to win a glorious victory. We're here to buy time for the people on the planet. Every minute we keep this fleet busy is another minute for them to evacuate more civilians." The first wave of Corach fighters reached them, and space erupted in weapons fire. The human shuttles were smaller and more maneuverable than their attackers, but they were also vastly outnumbered. Brooks watched 2 of her shuttles explode in brilliant flashes, taking 12 Marines with them. But the humans had one advantage the Corach didn't expect. They weren't trying to survive the battle. They were trying to accomplish their mission, regardless of the cost. That freed them to take risks no sane military force would consider. Staff Sergeant Monica Wells deliberately rammed her damaged shuttle into a Corach destroyer, creating a hole in their defensive line. Ross's shuttle flew through the gap, heading straight for the flagship's bridge. Behind them, the remaining human pilots engaged the escort ships in hopeless battles, buying precious seconds with their lives. On the Corach flagship, General Vask watched the humans sacrifice themselves with growing confusion. "Why do they continue fighting?" he demanded. "They cannot win. They must know they're all going to die." His bridge crew had no answer. In Corach culture, soldiers fought to conquer or retreated to preserve their forces. This mindless determination to continue a hopeless battle made no sense to them. "Perhaps they are simply insane," suggested his aide. "Deathworlders might not have the same sense of self-preservation as civilized species." Vask was beginning to suspect there was something about these humans that his intelligence reports had missed. No species could survive on a death world without being incredibly intelligent. Yet these creatures were throwing their lives away for no logical reason. Brooks's shuttle reached the flagship's hull and began cutting through the outer armor with plasma torches. She had only 8 Marines left, but they worked with the grim efficiency of soldiers who knew their time was limited. "Hull breach in 30 seconds, reported Sergeant Peter Nash. "Ship systems show heavy defensive positions beyond the airlock." "Doesn't matter," Brooks replied. "We go through whatever they put in front of us." The humans burst through the airlock into a corridor filled with waiting Corach soldiers. The resulting battle was brief and vicious. The Corach expected the humans to advance carefully, taking cover and trying to minimize casualties. Instead, the humans charged forward with reckless abandon, accepting wounds that would stop most soldiers and continuing to fight. Private Alan Cooper took 3 plasma hits to the chest, but kept advancing until he reached the enemy position. His sacrifice allowed Ross and 2 other Marines to break through the Corach line and reach the ship's main corridor. "Bridge is this way," Ross said, consulting his captured tactical display. "Levels up past their central command post." They fought their way through defenders who couldn't understand why these humans wouldn't stop when wounded, wouldn't retreat when outnumbered, and wouldn't surrender when offered the chance. The Corach were facing an enemy that operated by completely different rules. On the planet below, Elder Zara stood in the main communications center with Captain Morrison. Watching the space battle unfold on long-range sensors, the humans were dying one by one, but their assault shuttles were getting closer to the Corach flagship. "Your people are sacrificing themselves for us," Zara said quietly. "Is this normal behavior for humans?" Morrison watched another shuttle disappear from the tactical display. "We don't do it often," he admitted. "But when innocent people are in danger, and we're the only ones who can help, yes. This is what we do, even for strangers. Even for people you met 2 days ago. Especially for strangers. That's what proves we're doing it for the right reasons." Zara was beginning to understand something fundamental about human nature. Deathworlders weren't predators who happened to show mercy. They were protectors who happened to be deadly. Their capacity for violence existed solely to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. In space, Brooks and Ross had reached the flagship's bridge. Only they and Corporal Steve Bennett had survived the assault. The bridge was heavily defended with dozens of Corach soldiers between them and General Vask. "This is it," Brooks said into her communicator. "Captain Morrison, if you can hear this, we're about to attempt to take the bridge. Whatever happens, remember that Earth should be proud of what we tried to do here." "Commander," Morrison's voice crackled through the static, "Earth is already proud. The whole galaxy will know that humans stand up for innocent people, no matter what the cost." Brooks smiled grimly and turned to her two remaining Marines. "Gentlemen, shall we show these reptiles what humans are really made of?" The final assault was more like a force of nature than a military operation. The three humans advanced through defensive positions that should have stopped an entire battalion. They used captured weapons, improvised explosives, and sheer determination to fight their way across the bridge. Corporal Bennett fell just meters from the command platform. But his sacrifice allowed Brooks and Ross to reach General Vask himself. The Corach commander was a massive creature with razor-sharp claws and armored scales. But he backed away from the two bloodied humans with something that looked like fear. "You cannot win," Vask hissed. "Even if you kill me, my fleet will destroy your planet. Your sacrifice achieves nothing." Brooks looked at the alien general with eyes that held no hatred, only determination. "We're not here to win," she said simply. "We're here to show the universe that someone will fight for innocent people." Ross placed the explosive charges on the bridge's main control systems while Brooks kept the Corach commander occupied. They had enough demolition material to cripple the flagship's weapons and communication systems. "You're insane," Vask snarled. "You're throwing away your lives for nothing." "No," Brooks replied, as Ross activated the charges. "We're giving our lives for something. There's a difference."
No.
The explosion tore through the flagship's bridge, destroying the command systems and killing everyone present. Without their central coordination, the Corach fleet fell into chaos. Individual ships began retreating toward the edge of the system, unsure what to do without orders from their general. On the planet's surface, Captain Morrison watched the enemy fleet withdraw in confusion. The space around Kepler 442b was filled with the debris of destroyed ships and the bodies of brave humans who had died to protect strangers. "They did it," Morrison said quietly. "Brooks and her team actually did it." Elder Zara stood beside him, tears streaming down her face. In Vani. Culture tears were reserved for the most profound emotions. 37 of your people died to save us," she whispered. "How do we even begin to repay such a debt?" "You don't repay it," Morrison said. "You honor it. You remember what they died for. And you make sure their sacrifice meant something." 3 months later, a permanent memorial stood in the central square of the rebuilt Vani capital city. 37 crystal markers bore the names of the humans who had died protecting people they barely knew.
Elder
Zara visited the memorial every day, placing fresh flowers at each marker. The story of the Battle of Kepler 44 to be had spread throughout the galaxy. Some species were terrified by the news that Deathworlders would travel across space to fight for strangers. But others, species who had lived under the threat of stronger predators, began to see hope. A delegation of 12 different civilizations had approached Earth asking to join what they called the Human Protection Alliance. They didn't want to become warriors themselves, but they wanted to be part of something larger than individual survival. Captain Morrison remained on Kepler 44b, with a small garrison of human soldiers helping to train Vani defense forces, not to make them into fighters, but to ensure they could protect themselves until help arrived if needed. Elder Zara found him one evening, standing beside the memorial as the sun set behind the rebuilt crystal spires. "Captain, I've been thinking about what Commander Brooks said before she died," Zara began. "About showing the universe that someone will fight for innocent people." Morrison nodded. She was right. Someone has to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. "My people have decided something," Zara continued. We want to join your alliance, not as soldiers, but as healers. Every world you protect will need medical care for the wounded. We want to help heal the people that human warriors save." Morrison smiled, thinking about Brooks and Ross and all the others who had died believing that mercy and strength could work together. They would have liked that, he said.